Good morning. We are going to be reading about Caesar Augustus today. So we've already heard a little about Caesar Augustus. Do you remember who he is? Well, he's Julius Caesar's nephew and adopted son. Remember that part? He also was fighting against the people who had assassinated Julius Caesar. And he was siding up with Mark Antony, but then what happened? Then they turned against each other after Mark Antony, who married Caesar Augustus's sister and then left her for Cleopatra, quite the drama. After he did that and then seemed like he was going to start challenging authority as they were really ruling side by side, it ended with basically Mark Antony. He killed himself, so did Cleopatra, and now it's just Caesar Augustus in charge of the Roman Empire. So we're going to continue there. Now, Julius Caesar was the first dictator for life. And right after Julius Caesar, there were two dictators basically in charge, Caesar Augustus and Mark Antony. So now it's down to just one dictator again. So it seems as if we're getting rid of the Roman Republic, right? And we're seeing a dictator in charge instead, which is not the way that the Roman Empire was intended to be. This republic was meant to be that it was very even. Lots of people had control and power within the empire. And a dictator was just chosen at times of war. Thankfully, though, Caesar Augustus is a wonderful person who does great things for the Roman Empire, even though he is the dictator. Generally, a lot of people get too powerful and they start to make decisions that are really basically for themselves, not for the people. But Caesar Augustus is different. We're going to hear a little about his background and then start reading a chapter from your history book. So let's begin by just hearing this background information about Caesar Augustus, or Augustus Caesar. Now, after he defeated Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian became the ruler of Rome. His other name is Octavian. So we actually were calling him Octavian only before. Remember, his sister was Octavia. Now he becomes Augustus Caesar, as we're going to see. 4 years later, the Senate awarded him the honorary title of Augustus, which means sacred. Well, Octavian, who is now Augustus Caesar, so same person, Octavian is now Augustus Caesar. He tried to keep the Republican government. He had much more power than before, though, and his rule is considered the beginning of the Roman Empire. So we've been calling all of this time of history the Roman Empire, but really this is the beginning of a Roman Empire as they have expanded and they have all of this land in Europe, parts of Africa, and parts of Asia even. So this is the beginning of the Roman Empire, and it's a period of 200 years of peace known as the Pax Romana, which looks like Pax Romana, but we'd say Pax Romana. Would you say that? Pax Romana. It literally means Roman peace. Romana being Roman, and Pax being peace. So obviously, he did not live 200 years. So this is not all during the time of Augustus Caesar being in charge. However, he started this time of peace in the Roman Empire. Now, under Augustus, the Senate was continued, but it lost its power. It no longer chose who would rule. The emperor did. Augustus Caesar created a civil service. He established a postal system, introduced new coins, and changed the census to make the tax system more fair. A lot of these things we actually still do today in our country. We have a postal system, we've got currency, we've got actual paper money, and a census means they're counting how many people are living in different places. And we have taxes as well. So all of these things are still around. He set up the world's first fire department. Wow. He also had roads constructed throughout the empire to allow for communication between Rome and the provinces. Remember that a province is an area that was established that is under Roman rule, even though it's those people who were living there before who are still living there. For example, if they took over France, nearby country, So if they took over France, they might still have French people living there, and that is actually Gaul was what it was at the time. But those people would still be living there. However, it would be Roman rule that they would still have to report to. So roads would connect all of Rome and its provinces. Just one moment, let me bring a map. Okay. This is a great map of ancient Roman Empire. We'll be continuing to look at as we're seeing all of this dark green expanse is where it was at AD 14, the year AD 14. And then the light green were additional lands. So all of this area needed to be connected in some way. They needed to communicate with other parts of the empire. So the road system was very important for that reason. Okay, let's go back to that page going through the background of his life. Let's see, you may have heard the expression, all roads lead to Rome. That is a common phrase, which truly was what was happening with the road system that Augustus created. So all roads leading to Rome, it was basically the hub of all of these road systems that were connected because they needed to have Rome as the central point, like the capital, basically. Augustus also worked to revitalize Roman religion. He promoted religious festivals and encouraged worship of the Roman gods as a way of building loyalty to the state. Augustus paid for the renovation and construction of some elaborate religious temples and civic buildings, like courthouses. Augustus was a great patron of the arts as well. It was during his reign that Virgil wrote the Aeneid, which is a grand Roman epic that I hope we'll be able to read portions of a kid version of it after we finish some of the other mythology that we're going through. This epic poem was meant to glorify Augustus in Rome. Other writers also flourished during the reign of Augustus, including Horace, Livy, and Ovid. So let's take a look at our book now, which is going to have some of that repeat information. So Caesar Augustus or Augustus Caesar, you can say it either way. Now, when Octavian returned to Rome, he was only 33 years old. So this is immediately after he was responsible for Mark Antony killing himself, and he possibly really protected Rome by doing that because Mark Antony was starting to gain power and get a big head. Now, up to that time, he had had a remarkable life. He had been adopted by Julius Caesar as a young boy. Then he was named a consul of Rome when he was only 19 years old. So in today's time, that would be barely graduating from high school. And then you get one of the most important roles within government. It's almost like being president at 19. Now, Octavian and Mark Antony had beaten Caesar's enemies. Each had taken a part of the Roman Empire to command. Remember, they had two different parts that they were in charge of. Then Octavian beat Antony and Cleopatra. He conquered Egypt and took Cleopatra's wealth for himself. He also had 280,000 soldiers in his army. This was just the beginning. Now Octavian was ready to begin the most important part of his life. He was ready now to become ruler of Rome. Not one of the rulers of Rome, but the ruler of Rome. In this role, Octavian would show himself to be a smart ruler who used good sense. There he is, at 33, becoming the leader of Rome. Now, Octavian showed his smart leadership shortly after he returned from Egypt. At that time, the Roman people were celebrating Octavian's victory, which ended the civil war and saved Rome. Octavian led a crowd to the Temple of Janus. The temple's gates were left open during times of war. They were closed during peacetime. Rome had almost always been at war, so the gates had rarely been closed. Now, Octavian closed the gates. This act showed the people they would now live in peace. So he fought this war against Mark Antony, and then he had fought before that in the civil war against Julius Caesar's assassinators. But now he's saying, we are at peace. We are not wanting to be at war with anybody. So Octavian then set out to fulfill this promise. He wants peace for the empire. Soon afterward, Octavian bought land for his soldiers. He told them it was time to leave the army and go back to being farmers. Octavian himself went back to his job as consul. So he wants everything to go back to normal, right? This act, he's showing the soldiers don't have to be ready for more war. This is him actively saying, we're not looking for any war. Now, they have to be prepared in case somebody else comes to them, but he wants things to go back as much as possible to the way they were before Julius Caesar was assassinated. He was reelected as consul 3 years in a row. Then he told the Senate he wanted to give back all his power. He would serve Rome in any way the Senate decided. It's very similar to Cincinnatus, right? Cincinnatus did not want power for himself. He became dictator, and they wanted to keep him as dictator, but he wanted to go back to just life as a farmer. Now we get to Octavian becoming Augustus, which we saw already in that previous document. The Senate decided that Octavian should command the armies in all the large provinces. They also decided that Octavian should have a new name. He was to now be called Caesar Augustus. Augustus is a Latin word that means revered one. To be revered is to be most admired and respected. Now, Augustus was named the first citizen of Rome, and the month of his birth was renamed for him. Today, we call that month August. We looked at that in Classical Day last week. July had already been renamed for Julius Caesar. Now, Augustus was not a king or a dictator. All his power came from the Senate. He was always respectful of the senators and the assemblies. The senators trusted Augustus because he used his power wisely. Augustus used his power to name new governors for the provinces and new senators. He also made changes in the Roman army. He paid soldiers more money. This helped make the army a good place for poor men to earn a living. Augustus built good roads throughout the Roman Empire. These roads connected Rome and the provinces. Augustus often visited the provinces to check if the governors were doing a good job. Now, at the end of the Civil War, Rome was a dirty, overcrowded city. Most of the streets and buildings needed repair. The aqueducts, which carried water to the city, were also crumbling. So those are like pipes, basically. We'll see more about that very soon. Now, many people who had lost their land during the Civil War now lived in Rome. So they came from other parts and came into Rome once they lost their land. They were poor and hungry. They lived in old buildings that often caught fire or collapsed. There are just terrible buildings around. Now, some leaders would not care about that, but Augustus Caesar does. Augustus bought food for the poor. He rebuilt many of those old buildings. He made laws to require that all buildings met safety standards. We still have that in place today, not the exact same ones, but we still follow along with that thought that we want to make sure that nobody is just creating this building that actually could injure people, or it would not be a safe place for them down the road. We need to make sure they're safe. He started Rome's first fire and police departments. He put Agrippa, his naval commander, in charge of the city's water supply. Agrippa and his forces rebuilt the old aqueducts. Augustus wanted everyone to know about the citizens who had helped to make Rome great. He built a beautiful new forum. Remember, forum's like a downtown in Rome. Around this new forum, he placed statues of Roman heroes. It's not just gods and goddesses, but true Roman heroes. Augustus filled the city with beautiful new buildings. He built theaters, meeting places, and a grand new Senate building. He changed Rome from a dirty and ugly place to one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Augustus also helped to make Roman religion stronger. He repaired Rome's old temples and built new ones. He brought back many old religious ceremonies and festivals. So religious ceremonies can sometimes revolve around a specific holiday, but it's something to do with their religion. It is a formal event to honor, in their cases, a god or goddess. Right here is, oh, sorry, that zoomed in way too much. This is the Pantheon, which is a building used to worship Roman gods. It was built by Agrippa during the rule of Augustus, as it says here. This is still around. This is a photograph. So this building was actually built during that time, about 2,000 years ago. And if you go to Rome today, you can still see this. One of the most famous buildings in Rome. Augustus loved books and ideas. He often visited with writers and poets to learn to listen as they read their work aloud. Kind of like a story of Sinbad, all the people who came to listen to his stories. He asked wealthy Romans to be patrons to writers. Now, a patron is a person, as you can see here, who gives money to support somebody else. Today, we have writers who can make money because people are purchasing their books, okay? Whether that is directly to them or usually it's through like a publisher, but they get money for their books. At this time, people did not have the money to purchase books, and they didn't have books like we do today because there wasn't a printing press around. So at this time, it was only for the wealthy that they could have books, and so the writers weren't able to actually make any money off of their books. So they needed to have a patron who basically was going to pay for this person to have a place to live and plenty of food and just spend all their time writing, and they get these donations like they're a volunteer kind of. Now, these patrons give money to writers so that they can keep writing. During the time of Augustus, talented writers wrote many great works. And it was important to have that. Augustus and many others at the time believed in the value of the arts. So just because an artist, a sculptor, a musician, or a writer wasn't able to make money from people who are going to pay them, doesn't mean they shouldn't still be doing that work of creating excellent art. So that's what's happening here. People today still read some of those great works. And once again, I'd really like us to read a children's version of the Aeneid, which is from this classic Myths to Read Aloud, which is where we're reading all of the other myths. So I hope that we'll get to do that in just actually a few weeks, possibly. Now, Rome honored Augustus for rebuilding the city and making life better for the people. They named him Father of his country. Later, he was called Rome's first emperor. So remember that Julius Caesar was the first dictator for life. This is different. He is an emperor, not just of Rome, but the entire empire. Augustus was the most powerful man in the world. Most powerful man in the world because the Roman Empire was the most powerful empire in the world at this time. Yet he lived very simply. His house was pretty small. His meals were plain. He was loyal to his wife and family and the Roman people. Augustus ruled as an emperor from 27 BCE until 14 CE. The letters CE stand for the phrase Common Era. The Common Era began with the birth of Jesus. So Augustus ruled until 14 years after the birth of Jesus and 27 years before the birth of Jesus. So that is Caesar Augustus, an excellent man. He had wonderful wisdom. He implemented wonderful things to make Rome the city that it continued to expand and become great, in that today, if we go there, some of the things that we see are really because of him. So that is all for today. You've got some questions to answer about Caesar Augustus. You are welcome to go back and read this in Bright Thinker. The book is attached there, so just you can go back and read through parts of the chapter if you're not sure of certain things. And you will have some notes to take tomorrow instead. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I will talk to you later. Bye.